August 18 marks the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment being ratified, granting women the right to vote in the United States. Though this anniversary is a celebrated milestone in American history, the reality is that not all women were able to immediately exercise their right to vote, as racial discrimination kept Black women, and Black Americans in general, from voting. In fact, it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965, 45 years after the 19th Amendment was passed, that the federal government made it illegal to disenfranchise a person based on race. As America continues to deal with a global pandemic, as well as racial unrest in the country, exercising the right to vote in the 2020 election has never been more important, though ongoing acts of voter suppression still deny many people their right to vote today. CNBC Make It caught up with 5 young women who will be voting for the first time in the 2020 election, to get their insight on what the 19th Amendment means to them, why it's important for them to make their voice heard at the 2020 polls, and the social and political issues they've been paying close attention to this year. Alliyah Logan is a Jamaican-American youth advocate from Bronx, New York, who served as a former teen advisor for Girl Up, an organization founded by the United Nations Foundation to support the leadership development of young women. This fall, she will be a freshman at Smith College in Massachusetts. What does the 19th Amendment mean to you, and how important is it for you to exercise your right to vote in the 2020 election? This is such an important election, especially for women, and it's important for everyone to be fully engaged. For me, when I think about the 19th Amendment, I think about the foundation of women's rights and some sort of equality in America. And the reason why I say foundation is because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So when I think about 100 years ago and the environment of that time, I wouldn't have been able to be as accepted in the movement as I am today. And I think it's because the suffrage movement was viewed as being predominantly white. When you look at it, white women were really primarily only advocating for voting rights, whereas Black women, Native American women, Hispanic women, and other groups of women of color were advocating for so many other things like racial justice and class justice. So for me, looking back 100 years, I saw that there was just one narrative of stories that were valued at that time. And now, 100 years later, we're seeing that there are still so many more measures that need to be done to ensure that we're not only advocating for the voting rights of women, but also using that energy to advocate for other issues that women of color face, especially Black women, when looking at racial injustice and class injustice.